created all problems, doubts, confusions regarding the character of the federal constitution, because that part of the definition by A.C. Ware implies one, formal equality between the union and the state is a myth. Secondly, the complete absence of any element of dependence or subordination of states to the union as the absolute requirements of federal constitution. Accepting these assumptions as axiomatic, it is argued by the critics that there exist in the Indian constitution certain features and provisions having a centralizing tendency, tilting the balance of power in favor of the union at the expense of the states, thereby making the states dependent on and subordinate to the union. These provisions, which they describe as unitary features, are unfederal, valued in the federal principle to such an extent that the constitution can hardly accept it as federal. At the most, they are prepared to accept the constitution only as quasi-federal. This is their argument. Now, what are those unitary features which they identify as the grounds for objecting the federal character of the Indian Constitution? One, of course, all of you know, the emergency provisions in the Constitution under Article 352, where a national emergency can be proclaimed when the security of India is threatened by war, external aggression, or armed rebellion, during which time overriding legislative and executive powers are given to the union over the states, drastically altering the federal structure. That is one ground of objection, the emergency provisions. Secondly, Article 356, under which the state can be brought into the president's rule if the government of the state is not carried on in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. That is the second ground of objection. And thirdly, under Article 352, by which the Union Parliament is made competent to legislate on a state subject, when two or more states make a request to the Union to make a common law. There is a law common to all the states. And Article 249, under which the Parliament can legislate on a state subject if the Council of States passes a resolution with two-thirds majority that the state subject has assumed a national importance. All these criticisms and arguments were raised on the very floor of the Constituent Assembly. These arguments are not new. During the very framing of these federal provisions, naturally, as the chairman of the drafting committee, Dr. Ambedkar refuted all these arguments and defended the federal provisions as we have it now in the Constitution. Let us now look at the views of Dr. Ambedkar on the whole issue of Indian federalism, because this is a very critical issue. If I say on my own words, of course, it's very difficult to convince. So that's why I am heavily relying on the very words of Dr. Ambedkar in order to establish the fact that our constitution is federal, nothing but. Still, Dr. Ambedkar referred to the issue whether the constitution is unitary or federal. And I quote Dr. Ambedkar, and he said, "Federation means establishment of a dual polity. The draft constitution is federal in as much as it established what will be called as a dual polity. A dual polity under the constitution will consist of the union at the center and the states at the periphery, each endowed with sovereign powers to be exercised in the field assigned to them respectively by the constitution. Indian constitution is not a league of nations, or the states administrative units are agencies of the union." That's a wrong assumption. Again, in his concluding speech at the Constituent Assembly on 25th November 1949, Dr. Ambedkar reiterated his view as to the federal character of the Constitution and explained to the members, thus, and I quote Dr. Ambedkar, "As to the relation between the center and the states, it is necessary to bear in mind the fundamental principle on which it rests. The basic principle of federalism is that the legislative and executive authority is partitioned between the center and the states, not by any law to be made by the center, but by the Constitution itself. This is what the Constitution does. The states under our Constitution are in no way dependent upon the center for their legislative and executive authority. That's because the center and the states are co-equal in this matter, as both the union as well as the states derive their respective powers from the common source, that is the Constitution. And hence he concludes categorically that the Constitution is federal." Now, having regarded the Constitution as federal, Dr. Ambedkar then dealt with the criticism raised on the grounds of the so-called unitary reasons, resulting in too much of centralization of powers. He pointed out that all federal constitutions, including that of the United States, suffer from two inherent defects of rigidity and legalism, making the system incapable of adapting itself to the requirements of time and circumstances. After referring to the examples of Australian and Canadian constitution wherein conscious efforts were made to reduce the disadvantages following from rigidity and legalism, deviating from the rigid model of American Federation, Dr. Ambedkar claimed that it was only as part of the strategic efforts to overcome the problems of softening the rigidity and legalism that adequate exceptional provisions were made, which are miscalled as unitary in the Constitution. Now, responding to the charge that the Senate has been given power to override the states, whether it is in the emergency or when there is a constitutional breakdown in a particular state, the criticism is that during all these periods, overriding powers has been given to the union at the expense of the states. So, responding to that, Dr. Ambedkar said, justified such overriding powers on two grounds. First of all, that these overriding powers do not form the normal feature of the Constitution. Normal times, ours is a truly federal system. When exceptional circumstances demand some deviation from the normal scheme, so as to be a flexible governmental system, then of course exceptional provisions are made. They are not operating in normal times. Their use and operation are expressly confined to the emergencies only. Secondly, is whether we could avoid giving such overriding powers to the sender even when an emergency comes up. Those who do not admit the justification for such overriding powers to the sender, even in an emergency, do not seem to have a clear idea of the problem which is at the root of the matter. There can be no doubt that the residual loyalty of the citizen in an emergency must be to the sender and not the Constitution.